I recently put up a video on how to integrate Google Now with Node-RED to respond to voice comments. I was thinking about how I can turn this around and have my phone talk to me in the morning automatically. For example, I wake up and go to the bathroom, I turn the phone on, and whilst I'm getting ready, I get the weather updates and some other bits of information. As always, the link to the Node-RED code is in the video description. This is by no means a polished final solution, but I think it shows a great framework for anyone who wishes to do something similar. My purpose here was to show how to get information from multiple sources and then compile them to a single message. The solution in a nutshell is the following. The tasker which runs on the phone triggers every time I unlock my phone. If I'm on my home wireless network, it sends an HTTP request to Node-RED and the response will contain the text to be read on the phone. On the Node-RED side, I make sure that this happens only after 6 a.m. Because I don't want this chant to start every time I need to catch an early flight, for example. And it only happens once a day. The information sent back to the phone comes from a weather service, a YouTube service, and some recent tweets. If it is before 6 a.m. or the message already been read in a day, the service simply sends back a message which says no, which tells the tasker to ignore it. So let's see how it works in real life.
The weather is currently clear with a temperature of 7.23 degrees. Forecast for today is light rain in the morning. Temperature from 3.16 to 11.16 degrees. Chance of rain is 0.73%. Wind speed is 12.97 kilometers per hour from northwest. Sunset is at 17:29. Tomorrow will be mostly cloudy throughout the day. You have 2,354 subscribers on YouTube and 1,903,734 view. Breaking news from BBC, Italy grants a partial pardon to a former CIA officer for her role in the 2003 abduction of an Egyptian cleric. President Trump enters the House chamber to address the US Congress for the first time after his election win. President Trump promises renewal of American spirit in first speech to joint session of Congress. US President real Donald Trump tells Congress #joint session of plans to begin construction of Great Wall. President Trump calls current US immigration policy outdated, says country needs to move to a merit-based system.
And now if I open the phone for the second time, I'm not going to hear the message again. Now let's see how it all looks like in Node-RED. So the whole process starts with the HTTP in Node, which the URL for this is /morningstat. So that's what I will be calling from Tasker, and so the request runs into a function node which does some really simple logic, and it gets the current date and it checks if the current hour is after 6 o'clock, so if this is after 6 a.m. and then it also checks this global variable which is the morning stat, where I store the today's date in a sort of simple text format, and it checks whether that equals to today's date. So that this piece of code, so these if statements, make sure that if I want to, I'm not getting the same message multiple times a day. So it's only once a day. And I'm setting this message.execute flag to either true or false, depending on whether it's the first time or the second time. If I have this switch, which is a switch on this execute, so the message.execute, and if it's false, then I send this very simple response. Basically, I'm sending a text saying no back to the HTTP out. So that's the response going back to the tasker. Oops, too much scrolling. So if the execute is true, so this is the first time, then I start doing some stuff, and that's the first thing I'm calling forecast.io. Well, I'm doing two things. I'm calling forecast.io, and I'm calling a YouTube channel, which is a YouTube API, which is like a channel list API. So I'm going to go into the details of what this actually does and what is the information which is being returned. Each of these service returns the response in a JSON format. So the information goes into a function node as well, where I actually look at the data coming back and try to compile the text which will be spoken. So the forecast one is a probably a little bit more complicated, and I might have gone a little bit overboard on the weather forecast, but this is actually information that I do care about. Like sometimes the wind speed is important if I need to make sure that the kids wear hats and that sort of stuff. So um, the reason I choose this forecast, because it gives me weather service or a weather forecast for today, the current weather, the forecast for today, and it also gives me not only temperatures but some of the precipitation, like if it's going to be raining, the chance of rain or snow or some other stuff. So the first thing that I want to say is what is the current weather. So the current the weather currently, and I get the there is a nice summary which tells me the like if it's cloudy, and then the temperature, the current temperature in Celsius. And the next one is I'm going to say the forecast for today, which is again like a summary text which says that it's going to be rainy in the morning or cloudy in the afternoon. And I also want to state the temperature ranges, and this comes in I think it's 2 digits. So probably in the future I will get rid of the decimal places, because it's probably just too much information. So I would just say the minimum and the maximum temperature. On the precipitation, there is a variable which is the precipitation type, which can be rain or snow, and if it's undefined, that means that there is no rain expected for the particular day. So I check that just to make sure that I'm not saying anything rubbish. Otherwise I would just say that the like the chance of rain or snow is a particular percentage. I can also get the intensity, like millimeters per hour or something like that. So that information is also in the response, but I'm not using that at the moment. And on the wind, first of all, I'm getting the wind direction in a bearing, so it's like a degrees, like an azimuth degrees. So I'm converting that to like northeast, southeast. So these I don't know what it's called in English. So anyway, eventually I will say the wind speed is a particular kilometers per hour, and the direction is from, let's say, northeast. And finally, I always like to know when the sunset is. So in this one, I just calculate the sunset. So the sunset comes in Unix time, which is the second since 1st of January 1970. So I'm just doing the conversion to the JavaScript time, so I can use the get hours and the get minutes function to get the hours and the minutes for the sunset. And finally, I get the forecast for tomorrow, which is, again, I'm just saying the summary. So like, tomorrow is expected to rain or something like that. And I'm setting this string, which you can see here as well. It's basically everything up until this point. I'm setting this in a global variable, and I exit. And pretty much the same is happening in a YouTube. So I call the YouTube API, and I use the JSON node to convert the JSON response to JavaScript object, and I use pretty much the same stuff here. So it's the same logic. I construct a string with the variables inserted, and finally I will store these values in a global variable. And by the way, these two nodes here, they are just for testing. I wanted to make sure that I'm not using the Forecast.io service for too much, even though there is like a free, I think 1,000 requests per day is free. But I just saved the first request in a file, and I was working from the file while I was testing the logic, because there was a lot of testing here to make sure that it works for all occasions. So in parallel, the system Node-RED would get the forecast and the YouTube channel statistics, and it would finally would do a join. And I join the payloads as a string, and I say that I'm going to wait for 2 messages, and or as I would wait for 10 seconds. So if any of these services are not working, I would just give up after 10 seconds. And finally, I'm going to construct the full message. And what I'm doing here is I'm using the global variables to construct the full message instead of using the payload which is coming through here, because I've noticed that laying out the nodes like this, so let's say like the weather forecast being on the top and the YouTube being the second, does not guarantee that the final message which I get here by this join node is going to be in the same sequence, because whichever comes first will be in the text first. So sometimes the weather come first, sometimes the YouTube. So, and that's why I'm just putting everything in a global, and then I'm constructing the proper sequence here like this. And I'm putting like a new line between each of them, because I've noticed that having a new line instead of just a space, the speech part in Google is going to leave a slightly longer pause, so it's easier to tell the different parts apart. So I do the forecast first, and I do the YouTube statistics, and then finally do the tweets, which is coming from a different source. So if you have used the tweets nodes before, then you will know that it's basically every time a tweet is created, then it would trigger. So you can't sort of trigger it on demand. So I've created a separate one which is looking for tweets in the BBC Breaking user. And every time something comes here, then it goes to this function node, and all I'm doing here is I'm saving these tweets. So I create a couple of objects. I create this age. I'm going to use this morning stat tweets global variable to store all my tweets, which I'm going to be saving here later. So I check whether this object is already created, and if it is, then I'm just getting the tweets. And I cycle through the tweets, and every tweets just have two attributes. There is a created and a text. And and I'm checking whether the current time minus the created is bigger than the age, which I set the age to 8 hours. And so I only want to talk about something which is less than 8 hours, and that's the reason you are hearing so much of the Trump stuff in the example, because that essentially means that most of the things that are coming through on the breaking news, well, in the morning in European hours, would be stuff that is happening in the US in the evening, the previous day. Anyway, that's just a side story. So I just get rid of anything which is older than 8 hours, and I just push the new tweet which is coming through into this new list. And then finally, this is the part where I put the actual text together, which goes to the speech part. So, breaking news from BBC, and using this for loop, I'm just adding all the tweet text one after each other with a new line string at the end. And this part here, which is the substring, it just makes sure that I'm using this to get rid of the URL which comes at the end of each tweet, because it just sounds really stupid in the on the speech. So and that's always at the end of the tweet. Well, at least that's how it looks like for BBC. So I'm getting rid of that, and then I save the text. So this part, the tweet part, works independently from the the main request, and again, that's why I'm using the global variable. So whatever is in the global variable, I'm just adding to the output. So finally here, I've add all these texts up together. As you can see, that it's here in the debug, and that's it. It's just being pushed to the response. So the response back to the phone is a simple text. And the only other thing I have here is for testing, you can reset the trigger. So if you want to test it for the second time, you click on this inject node, and this was just something for my testing. So I can see what is happening here, what are the tweets that are being collected. So I can just push that into the debug, and you can see it here. So you can see how the text, the tweets look like, and then you can see is the tweet had the exact, well, the actual text, and always the link at the end, which I'm getting rid of when I'm reading this aloud. So next, I wanted to show how about the weather forecast. So I'm using something which is, I think it originally was called Forecast.io, but now it's called the Dark Sky API. And if I log in, the service is rather simple. So I looked at a couple of services. I looked at Open Weather Map, which is I'm using for something else, but it gives me current weather conditions. It doesn't give me forecast. And I also looked at AccuWeather. Apart from the fact that it's they don't have a free service, well, they do have a free service for 6 months, but then it goes to paid service. They have multiple APIs, one for current, one for a forecast, so that would have been a little bit more complicated. But then I found this one which does everything in the same request. So you create your account and you get an API. You get a key. By the way, I'm going to reset this after I created this video, so don't worry about this code. And for this one, you are also getting a like a test here. So if I click on this one, that's how the data looks like, which is coming back from this API. And if you just Google JSON validator and you go to, I think this one, the JSON formatter and validator. I'm using this for all these JSON stuff, and it gives us such a nice representation of the data which is coming through. So in the response, you are getting some of the latitude, longitude, and this example gives you the weather for LA. And so you are getting weather for you're getting several objects. So you're getting the current. So that's the current weather condition, and that's where I'm getting the current temperature and the wind speed and this stuff. And as you can see, the summary says the current weather is clear. So that's also what I'm using in the service, in the message. And then there is a stuff which gives you our forecast by minute. I'm not using that at all. And one that you get hourly. Again, I'm not using this, and then this is the one which gives you the daily forecast, and I think it gives you forecast for a number of days. I think 5 days, or maybe 10 days, or 16, whatever. So the first one, it's 2, 4, 6, 8 days. So the first one is always the today's date. So again, I'm using the summary here. To tell me what's the summary for today, and then you have the usual stuff. Okay, what's going to be the minimum temperature, the maximum temperature, your wind speed, the wind bearing. So I'm actually using the wind speed and the wind bearing predictions for today, not for the current one, and some other bits and pieces. And if you go to the next one, then that would be for tomorrow. And if you go back to if you look at the code, whenever I do something for today, then it's basically message.payload.daily and data 0 summary. So that data 0 is always today. And then if I scroll down to tomorrow, then, where is it? Yeah, tomorrow is again message payload daily data 1 and summary. So that would be tomorrow. So it's very easy to navigate through this structure here. The only other thing I have done is, if you go back to the API documentation, where is it? Docs, I think, and forecast request. Yeah, so you see the structure here. And by the way, in the request, you provide, so this is how the request looks like. You need to provide a key and then the latitude and longitude for the city. That you want to query, and the other thing I'm doing here, so if you see my API call, so it forecasts my API key, and then the latitude latitude and longitude for Hungary, and then you can have a couple of parameters. And I'm using just only two. So the first one is the exclude, because I'm excluding the hourly and the alerts, just to reduce the amount of traffic going through between the servers. So I'm not using the, probably I should exclude this one as well, but I only care about currently and daily. So these are the two sort of objects that I'm using. So I don't need the flags, the hourly, and you can ask not to be sent by using this exclude equals and then just list them separated by zero, and separated by comma, and another one is the units. So the default units is US units, and you can change them to, so you can use SI units, but I'm using CA because it's same as SI, but the wind speed is kilometer per hour instead of meters per second, which I think it makes more sense. And that's pretty much it. And you can read the rest of the documentation here. You know, the units. You can even have set this up so it sends the response back in other languages. Of course, English being the default. Working with the YouTube channel API or the data API is equally simple, and I found this this reference here on the YouTube, and it has this section to try this API, so you can read about the parameters that you can supply, and then actually test it out here, and then see how the response look like. And unfortunately, I don't have the response saved, but finally I'm using this. So HTTPS www.googleapis.com YouTube version 3 channels. And then the first one is the parts. So that's the information you want to get back, and you can read about the parts from parts here. And I want the statistics because that gives me subscribers and number of views. And then in the ID, you need to list the channel ID or channel IDs separated by, I think, comma. And so the channel ID is some internal ID. So again, just Google it. Once you go into your YouTube settings, you can find your channel ID, and finally you need the API key. And the API key is you log into Google Developer Console, and so first of all you need to create a credential. Blah blah blah. So I'm not, which is here. I'm not going to not going into my credentials because that shows all my keys and everything. But here in the API, enable API, you need to enable the YouTube data API. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So you do that. You click enable, and you will have something here as well, which shows you that you need to create a credential. So you go there, and then you just create a new API key, and that's the API key which goes into here in the request. So that's all there is to it. And then again in the code, you are getting a structure which says items, and because I only requested for one single channel, but there's only one object in this array, so it's item 0, and then dot statistics, and subscriber count gives me the number of subscribers, and the view count gives me the total number of views for that channel. There is some other stuff there, and also if you're specifying different parts, I think it's content details, then you can get some other stuff like how many likes or comments you have on your channel. And there is a whole host of other stuff here on YouTube which is not part of the data API but the analytics API, where you can filter on specific dates, and you can even get your estimated revenue and some other stuff, but I haven't been able to make that work yet. I think that's a slightly bit more complicated, and I just didn't have the time to get my head around it. So but again, if you are interested in that sort of stuff, you need to look at study that in a little bit more detail. So let's see how it works in Tasker on the phone. So I created a new, first of all, you need to create a new profile, and so that is going to be the trigger for the new logic. And so I've already done that, but basically you click on here, you want to create a new event, and the event is going to be on display and display unlocked. So there are a lot of other events in Tasker, so you might need to choose a different event if you don't like this thing coming on when you first unlock your phone. But that's what I'm using here. So when the display is unlocked, then you create a new task. Of course, when you are setting up for the first time, it will ask you to create your task name and go into your task description or the task setup immediately. Since I have it created already, I'm just going to click on tasks, and then I have this morning stat again, named same as the service in the application or the HTTP in service. So just go into the details. So I'm doing a couple of things here. First, I'm adding this if statement. So again, plus and I think it's under task and yes, if because let's say if I'm not at home or I don't want my phone to randomly start poking around with this IP and sending requests. And the way you can check whether you are on your home network is in the if. There is a variable which is percentage Wi-Fi I, so it's Wi-Fi information. The Wi-Fi info variable contains a lot of stuff like if you are connected to the wireless, if you have connection, and also the SSID. So the check to check whether you are on a specific SSID is to use the matches operator, and then just put your SSID with star, so star SSID star. So that's it. And the next we are going to call, so if this is true, then we are going to call Node-RED. So first you need to specify the server and the port. So that's my local IP for the Node-RED server. The port is 1880, and I'm using HTTPS, and I have authentication set up. So it's HTTPS colon username colon/username colon password at and the IP, and the path is the morning stat. So that's the same things that you set in the HTTP in node. And the only other things I've done is I tick this one to trust any certificate, because I'm using the self-signed certificate, so it might not connect if you don't have this checked. I'm not sure, but I checked it anyway. And the next one is, the next command is, I'm using exactly the same as before. So I'm going to use the say action, and I use the parameter HTTPD, or variable HTTPD, which contains the text which is coming back from the web service. I'm thinking about reducing the speed actually, because I'm not exactly fresh in the morning. And I've also added a condition here. It's going to say the response unless the response is no. So if you remember back to the code, I'm sending back a text no when it's like, it's the second time or the third time. So this is how I make sure that the phone is just not saying no every time I unlock the phone. But I think that's pretty much it. And it's actually quite nice. I haven't really noticed this, but you're seeing these green lines here, which actually means that with the current state of the phone, this if statement is true. Step 2 and 3 are going to be executed, and this statement is false. Means that it's this say is actually, so this condition is false, which means that the system is not going to say anything, because it's the last response was no. That is all about my second Google Now and Node-RED integration. I hope you liked this video. Don't forget the link to this Node-RED flow is in the video description. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.